Okay, welcome to this 10-minute tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll be looking at Ielts Writing Task 2 and how to use examples to develop your ideas. Now, why do we need to use examples? Students find this very, very difficult. They don't understand, firstly, why to use it and how to use it. And how to think of examples. That's really what we're going to focus on. So why do we need to use examples in our Writing Task 2 essay? So the main reason is that examiners will be assessing your ability to develop your main ideas. So in your essay, you will state your idea or your opinion. You'll explain why you think this, and to give a further explanation, to further develop your answer, you give an example to back this up, to back up why you think this, to back up your idea, to back up your opinion. So this is like the standard way of developing your ideas in the writing test. And in order to do this, you must have a strategy. You must have a method of doing this. And so using examples is a very effective and easy way of doing this. So if you remember in your planning stage that I've talked about in the previous 10-minute tutorial, this is what you would be doing in that 8 to 10 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes planning time before you start writing your essay in the test. You would put together your main idea, the reason why you think this, and the example that you would use. So let's take a look at how to think of examples. There are lots of methods of different ways that you can use examples in your essay. You could use your own personal stories, things that have happened to you personally, real life events perhaps of somebody else that you know in your family or friends, or an event that you know happened in real life. Something from the news you could use as an example, so a really big event that's happened that's well known, or just something from your own knowledge that you know from the news that you've read or heard about. A fact, so just a fact of life you could use as an example to illustrate your point. It really depends on the question, what's relevant, and what you feel comfortable doing. And you can refer to research or to a survey. And there may be other ways, other examples that you could use, other methods of using examples, but these I think are the main ones that you should stick to. I should mention that in this tutorial I will be focusing on the last one, referring to research and referring to surveys, because this is probably the most easiest and probably the most common one that I see in most essays. Most students do this, and I encourage my students to use this actually, because I think it's just easy. And it's quick. You don't have to think about it too much. So this is the way. This is what I'm going to focus on in this tutorial, referring to research and surveys. Okay, so how to think of examples. So one point before we go into how to refer to research and to surveys, an important point that I want to make here is that you don't have to. Don't think about making what examples to use too much. Don't think about it too much. Do not overthink it. It doesn't have to be a real example. And I think this is the confusion students have sometimes. They think that they have to use real life true examples. You do not. You can simply make it up. You can make up a statistic. You can make up, you can't make up a real life event, obviously. That's, you only use that if you actually know of a relevant real life event. That's why I mentioned that it depends on the question, it depends on your knowledge and what you know to be true, and so on. If you find yourself you can't think of a relevant example, just make one up. The examiner does not care. They're not going to go away and Google your example, is this correct? They don't care. They're not interested in that. All they want to see is how you develop your answer. Are you able to expand your main idea and explain it in a logical, coherent way using relevant examples? Are you able to back up what you're saying? That's a fully developed answer. Having said that, when you make up your example, and in this case, in this tutorial, when we're talking about studies and surveys and things like that, your statistic that you use, the outcome of the research or the outcome of the survey must be reasonable. It can't be, unrealistic. It has to be realistic, and we'll take a deeper look into that in a second. It must make sense, and it must be relevant. It must support your main idea, and I think that's a really, really important point. It can't be just some random thing. It must support directly your main idea. So it must be relevant to the question, and it must be relevant to your main idea. And obviously your main idea will be directly relevant to the question being asked, and your example will also be relevant to your main idea. So everything is linked. So two of the most commonly used methods in the type of examples you can use, and certainly the ones I encourage my students to use, just because I think it's easy, it's quick, and you can simply make it up. It stops you from thinking about your personal story. Sometimes that can take up too much time. Simply just making up sometimes is just the quickest way to do it. So referring to research or a survey. So these are the two ways you could do that. So a recent survey found, or a recent survey revealed, that 60% of people living in the UK do not have time to exercise. So obviously this question is about people having time to exercise, and my main point would be that people don't have time to exercise, and I would explain that, and this is the example that I would use. So I've completely made that up, and I've used 60% as kind of a reasonable figure to use. It's not, if I said 80% or 90% or 99% of people, that seems a bit not very realistic, not very reasonable. So just keep the statistic that you use reasonable, believable, reasonable. Here's another example. So a recent research has revealed that there has been a 20% increase in families choosing to homeschool their children. So again, if I were to say there was an 80% increase in families choosing to homeschool, that doesn't sound right. 20% sounds right. So even though you're making it up, and the examiner is definitely not going to go and check that, that's not part of their job, it still needs to be a reasonable, sensible statistic. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay. Just remember, your main idea must be relevant to the question. So your main idea must be relevant to the question, and then your example must be linked to your main idea. So everything is relevant to each other. And this is what the examiner is looking for as well. Many people take, so this is a question. Many people take part in sports as children, but do not take part in any physical exercise as adults. What are the reasons people avoid exercise? So this is an Ielts question. So let's go through this of how, in your planning time, how would you plan the first paragraph, and what examples you would use in that first paragraph to back up your main idea. So the first main idea in the first paragraph would be that, and try to think of really easy ideas. It doesn't have to be extravagant ideas. Don't waste your time. So no time as adults. So at adults, you don't have that much time anymore. You have other responsibilities. So that would be my first main idea. You can see it's linked to the question, that as children you have the time, but as adults there's no time to exercise. So it's directly linked to the question. My explanation is that as adults, you have other commitments, work, family, so it doesn't leave any free time for exercise. So the example is then what we looked at previously. A recent survey found that 60% of people living in the UK do not have time to exercise. So that's how I would plan the first paragraph, plan the first main paragraph, and how I would develop my answer using an example. So this is what my paragraph would look like. So my first main point, my first main idea, one of the main reasons why adults no longer take part in exercise as they once did in their youth is that they no longer have the time to do so. As adults, they have commitments that take priority, such as their jobs and family commitments, leaving them without much spare time to work out. For example, a recent survey revealed that 60% of people living in the UK do not have time to exercise because of other priorities in their life. So as you can see, the first sentence is my first main idea, which is directly linked to the question. Then I give an explanation. I further develop the answer and explain why I think this, and then I back it up with my example. So yeah, that's basically how you would construct how you would develop your answer using examples. So, like with everything, with IELTS, you have to practice. This takes time, it takes practice again and again and again until you get really, really good at it. So get some past questions, plan your answer. So if you haven't seen my last 10-minute tutorial, just look back in my posts and you'll find it about planning. It's really, really important to plan. I talk about all of that in that lesson. So plan your answer. What is your main idea for answering that question? Why do you think this? What is your explanation for that? And what examples will you use to support this view? So practice exactly what I've done in this lesson and do it again for lots and lots of different exam questions, and that's how you'll get good at it. Feel free to post your paragraphs and your examples that you use. I'll be more than happy to take a look and give you a little bit of feedback. And yeah, like and share this with anyone else you think might benefit from it. And I'll see you in another 10-minute tutorial.